Chapter 12, that is ecosystem. So we are going to study the five context, that is ecosystem structure and function, then productivity, then decomposition, then energy flow, then ecological pyramids, right? An ecosystem can be visualized as a functional unit in nature. It is functional, right? There's lots of process are going happening, so these are the functions. Whereas where living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment. The ecosystem varies greatly in shape, size, from a small pond to a large forest or a sea. So, so many ecologists regard the entire biosphere as a global ecosystem, as a composite of all local ecosystems on Earth. Right? Since this system is too much big and complex to be studied at one time, it is um, it is convenient to divide it into two basic categories, namely terrestrial and aquatic. So forest, grassland and deserts, these are the terrestrial ecosystem, forest, grasslands and deserts, right? Now pond, lake, wetland, river and estuary. Pond, lake, wetland, rivers, wetland, river and estuary are some examples of aquatic ecosystems. So crop fields and an aquarium may also be considered as man-made ecosystem. So crop fields and an aquarium may also be considered as man-made ecosystems. Okay. So at the structure of the ecosystem, in order to appreciate the input, that is productivity, transfer of energy, that is food chain, wave, nutrient cycling. So transfer of energy through food chain, wave, or either nutrient cycling. Okay. So and productivity is the input, that is the productivity, and the output, that is degradation and energy losses. That is 10% and degradation by the decomposers. So we look at the relationship, that is cycle chains and waves. Cycles, chains and waves that are created as a result of these energy flows, okay, within the system and their interrelationship. Now the ecosystem structure and functions. Okay. So various components of the environment, that is abiotic and biotic. So individual biotic and abiotic factors affected each other and their surrounding. Okay. See how the flow of energy takes place within these components of this ecosystem, right? Now, now interaction now interaction of biotic and abiotic components result in a physical structure that is characteristic for each type of ecosystem. Interaction of biotic and abiotic components result in a physical structure that is characteristic for each type of ecosystem, right? Identification and enumeration of plant and animal species of an ecosystem give, 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 gives its species composition, right? Now vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. So vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. For example, trees occupy top strata or layer of a forest. For example, trees occupy top vertical strata or layer of a forest. Shrubs the second, and the herbs and grasses occupy the bottom layers. Okay. So this is the vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called the stratification. The components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit when you consider the following aspects. The components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit. Okay, as a unit when you consider the following aspects. So productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. So these are the components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit. They function as a unit, right? These are the components of the ecosystem. Okay. To understand the ethos of an aquatic ecosystem, let's take a small pond, right? This is fairly a self-sustainable unit and a rather simple example that explains even the complex interactions that exist in an ecosystem. Aquatic ecosystem. A pond is a shallow water body in which all the above mentioned four basic components of an ecosystem exhibited. Now, the abiotic component is the water with all the dissolved inorganic and organic substances and the rich soil deposit at the bottom of the pond. The solar input, the cycle of temperature, daylight, and other climatic conditions regulate the rate of function of the entire pond. The autotrophic components include the phytoplankton, some algae, and the floating submerged marginal plants found at the edges. So, autotrophic components include the phytoplankton, some algae, and the floating submerged and marginal plants formed at the edges. The consumers are represented by the zooplankton, the free swimming and bottom dwelling forms. The decomposers are the fungi, bacteria, flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. The decomposers are the fungi, bacteria, flagellates. The decomposers are fungi, bacteria, and flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. This system performs all the functions of any ecosystem and of the biosphere as a whole. So all the functions of any ecosystem, okay. Now and of the biosphere as a whole, that is conversion of inorganic into organic matter with the help of radiant energy of the sun by the autotrophs, consumption of the autotrophs by heterotrophs, and then decomposition and mineralization of the dead matter to release them back for reuse by the autotrophs. These events are repeatedly over and over again. There is unidirectional movement of energy towards the higher tropic levels and its dissipation and loss as heat to the environment. So there is unidirectional movement of the energy towards the higher tropic levels and its dissipation and loss as a heat to the environment. Right now, the productivity. A constant input of solar energy is the basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. A constant input of solar energy is the basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. Okay. So under the productivity context, so primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis. I repeat it again. Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis. So it is expressed in terms of weight, that is you see gm or per unit area, right? Per unit area, oh I can say like gram per meter square or something, or energy like kilocalorie per meter square, right? The rate of biomass production is called the productivity. So gram per meter square, just remember it like gram per meter square or kilocalorie per meter square. Okay, there is area, so in meter, and you can say like organic matter in gram or something, just remember it. The rate of biomass production is called the productivity. It is now it is expressed in terms of like gram per meter square per year, okay, or kilocalorie per meter square per year to compare the productivity of different compositions. So the rate of biomass production, it is the productivity. Now if it is the productivity, then it is per year. Okay, so gram per meter square per year, kilocalorie per meter square per year, right? To compare the productivity, it can be divided into gross primary productivity, GPP, and NPP, that is net primary productivity. Now gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis, that is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis. This is the gross primary productivity. A considerable amount of GPP is utilized by plants in respiration. Now gross primary productivity minus respiration process is the net primary productivity, NPP, that is GPP minus respiratory losses is equals to NPP, net primary productivity. Net primary productivity is the available biomass for the consumption to heterotrophs, that is herbivores and decomposers. Secondary productivity is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by consumers. So secondary productivity is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by consumers, right? Now primary productivity depends on the plant species inhabiting a particular area. So primary productivity depends on the plant species inhabiting a particular area. It also depends on variety of environmental factors, availability of nutrients, and photosynthetic capacity of plants. So it also depends on the environmental factors, therefore it varies in different types of ecosystem. The annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 172 billion tons dry weight of organic matter. So this is the annual net productivity of the whole biosphere. So this is about the whole biosphere, that 172 billion tons. and we consider it the dry weight, okay, not fresh weight. Of this, despite occupying about 70% of the surface, the productivity of the oceans are only 55 billion tons. Even if it's like covering 70%, like almost more than the terrestrial ones, but the productivity is very less, that is 55 billion tons. And the reason is that the rest of is on the land, that is how much, 115, that is 115 billion tons. Now discuss the main reason for the low productivity of ocean with your teacher. It's because there is low sunlight and everything, okay. So now the detrivorous. So now the decomposition. Right? So decomposition, you have heard. So right. So the decomposition, okay. So the decomposition, you know, the earthworm being referred to as the farmer's friend. Why this is? Because they help in breakdown of complex organic matter as well as in loosening of the soil, okay. Similarly, decomposers break down complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water and nutrients, and the process is called the decomposition. The products of the decomposition are carbon dioxide, water and nutrients, okay. This is the decomposition. Now dead plants remains such as leaves, bark, flowers, and dead remains of animals, including fecal matter, constitute detritus, which is the raw material for decomposition. So, the dead plant remains such as leaves, bark, flowers. Dead plant remains such as leaves, bark, flowers, and dead remains of animals, including fecal matter. Remains of animals, including fecal matter. Okay, and constitute detritus, which is the raw material for decomposition. The important steps in the process of decomposition are fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humidification, and mineralization. The first step is the detrivorous. So these are the earthworm break down detritus into smaller particles. This is called the fragmentation. Now, by the process of leaching, water soluble inorganic nutrients go down into the soil origin and get precipitated as unavailable salts. Now, bacterial and fungal enzymes degrade detritus into simpler inorganic substances. This process is called the catabolism, right? Now that all the above steps, that fragmentation, leaching and catabolism, they operate simultaneously on the detritus, okay. Now humidification and mineralization occur during decomposition in the soil. So humidification and mineralization occur during decomposition in the soil, okay. Humidification leads to accumulation of the dark color amorphous substance called humus that is highly resistant to microbial action and undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate. So humidification leads to accumulation of dark colored and amorphous substance called humus that is highly resistant to microbial action and undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate, okay. So being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir of nutrients. Now the humus is further degraded by some microbes and release of inorganic nutrients occur by the process known as mineralization. So now this humus is further degraded by some microbes and release of inorganic nutrients occur by the process known as mineralization, which is a nutrients, right? Inorganic nutrients, right? Carbon dioxide, water and nutrients, these are the products of the decomposers, right? Now decomposition is largely an oxygen recurring process. It occurs when the condition is aerobic, right? The rate of decomposition is controlled by chemical composition of detritus and climatic factors, okay. In a particular climatic condition, decomposition rate is lower if detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, which is hard to digest, right, and quicker if if detritus is lower if detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugars. Temperature and soil moisture are the most important climatic factors that regulate decomposition through their effects on the activities of the soil microbes, right. Now warm and moist environment favor decomposition. Warm and moist environment favor decomposition, whereas low temperature and anaerobic inhibit decomposition, resulting in build of the organic material. So warm and moist environment, they favor the decomposition, while low temperature and anaerobic, that is opposite to it just builds up the organic material that it inhibits. Now the energy flow. Now the energy flow. Okay, so except for the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem, sun is the only source of energy for all ecosystems on earth. Okay, of the incident solar radiation, less than 50% of it is photosynthetically active radiation, that is PAR. Less than 50% of it is, that is photosynthetically active radiation, that is PAR. We know that plants and photosynthetic bacteria autotrophs fix sun's radiant energy to make food from simple inorganic materials, right? Now plants capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR, that is photosynthetically active radiation, and this small amount of energy sustains the entire living world. So it is very important to know that how the solar energy captured by plants flows through different organisms of an ecosystem. By plants flows through different organisms of an ecosystem. Now all organisms are dependent for their food on producers, and this can be plants and photosynthetic bacteria, and either directly or indirectly. Like we humans depend indirectly, herbivores depends directly. So you find you read unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to producers and then to consumers. uh, is this in keeping with the first law of thermodynamics? Yes, I guess yes. What just happened? So for the ecosystems are not exempt from the second law of thermodynamics, right? They need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require to counteract the universal tendency towards increasing disorderliness. So further, ecosystems are not exempt from the second law of thermodynamics. Because they need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require to counteract the universal tendency towards increasing disorderliness. Means universe is expanding because we don't want it, so this is why we need something to make it stay at the same place. The green plant in the ecosystem are called the producers. The green plants in the ecosystem are called producers. So in a terrestrial ecosystem, major producers are herbaceous and woody plants. Okay, so likewise, producers in an aquatic ecosystem are various species like phytoplankton, algae, and higher plants. Okay, higher plants can be also producers in the ecosystem, right? Aquatic ecosystem. Now about the food chains and webs that exist in nature. Now starting from the plants, that is producers, food chains or rather webs are formed such that an animal feeds on a plant or on another animal and in turn is food for another. So they are depending on each other, right? The chain or web is formed because of its interdependency. Okay, the chain or wave is formed because of its interdependency. So no energy that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. So no energy that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. The energy trapped by the producer hence is either passed on to a consumer or the organism dies. So energy trapped by the producer hence is either passed on to a consumer or the organism dies, right? Death of organism is the beginning of the detritus food chain, that is web. So death of the organism, right? So death of organism is the beginning of the detritus food chain, right? Now all animals depend on plants directly or indirectly for their food needs. All animals depend on plants directly, indirectly for their food needs. Now they are hence called as consumers and also called heterotrophs. If they feed on the producers, the plants, they are the primary consumers. If they feed on the producers, the plants, they are called the primary consumers. And if the animals eat other animals, which in turn eat the plants, if the animals eat the other animal, which in turn eat the plants or their produce, they are called the secondary consumers. It means first is the plant, then animal, and then another animal. So another animal is the is the secondary consumers. Interesting. Likewise, you could have tertiary consumers, and then another to another animal. Then there's the tertiary consumers. Interesting. Obviously, the primary consumers will be herbivores. Some common herbivores are insects, birds, mammals in terrestrial ecosystem, and mollusks in aquatic ecosystem. So some common herbivores. Okay. So some common herbivores are insects, birds, and mammals. Birds, and mammals in terrestrial ecosystem, and mollusks in aquatic system. So these are the So these are the common herbivores. Herbivores can be insects, birds, and mammals, right? Insect, birds, and mammals can be herbivores in terrestrial ecosystem and mollusks in aquatic ecosystem, right? The consumers that feed on these herbivores are carnivores, or more correctly primary carnivores. The consumers that feed on these herbivores are carnivores, or more correctly primary carnivores. Through those secondary consumers, okay, those animals that depend on the primary carnivores for food are known as the secondary carnivores. A simple grazing food chain that GFC is depicted below, that is grass eating, the goat eating on grass, man eating the goat, which is not good. Okay, so producer, primary consumers, and secondary consumers. So this is the grazing food chain, that is simple grazing food chain starting from the grass, that is producer. Now the detritus food chain, that is DFC, begins with dead organic matter. It is made up of decomposers, which are heterotrophic organisms, mainly bacteria and fungi. Okay, chain have the decomposers, bacteria and fungi, right? They meet their energy and nutrient requirements by degrading dead organic matter or detritus. Okay, dead organic matter or detritus. So they are also known as the sapropods. Decomposers secrete digestive enzymes that break down dead and waste materials into simple inorganic materials, which are subsequently absorbed by them. In an aquatic ecosystem, GFC is the major conduit for energy flow. As against this, in terrestrial ecosystem, a much simpler fraction of energy flows. A much larger fraction of energy flows through the detritus food chain than the GFC. Okay, detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some levels. Some of the organisms of DFC are prey to the GFC animals, and in a natural ecosystem, some animals like cockroaches, crows are omnivorous. Now, this natural interconnection of food chains make it a food web. So, how would you classify human beings? So, this is it.